From filmmaker Jack Sholder comes the 1985 follow-up to Wes Craven's 1984 original, featuring the untimely resurgence of the titular dream demon as he attempts to use a young man as a vessel to the physical world of the living. The film is surely one of the weirdest sequels out of the entire franchise, as well as the entry that features the most visually frightening incarnation of Freddy Krueger himself. Let's take a look at A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge.
Jesse, we got special work to do here, you and me.
Released in 1985, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, is a follow-up to the original A Nightmare on Elm Street, coming out just shy of a year after the release of the original film. The movie was directed by Jack Sholder, written by David Chaskin, and of course, executively produced by the man, myth, and legend himself, Bob Shaye. Freddy's Revenge is one of those horror films that, for whatever reason, feels older and more vintage than its respective predecessor. In this instance, the original film. I'm not sure why that is exactly, specifically with this film, but everything about the way it's shot, the look of the film, the editing choices, the acting, even to the marketing of the film, especially that infamous VHS tape release, adds to this notion that Freddy's Revenge somehow predates the original Nightmare on Elm Street, even though that makes no sense and isn't actually true in the slightest. Freddy's Revenge tells the story of Jesse Walsh, a teenage boy who moves into the Elm Street house previously inhabited by Nancy Thompson from the first film. Soon thereafter, Jesse begins experiencing nightmares involving Freddy Krueger, the infamous dream killer who seeks revenge against the children and parents of Elm Street. However, as the movie progresses, it becomes clear that Freddy is possessing Jesse, using him as a conduit to enter the real world and continue his killing spree outside of the dreamland. And what's worse, nobody believes what Jesse is saying about Freddy, not his friends, and especially not his parents. Pre-production for A Nightmare on Elm Street 2 commenced in April of 1985, and screenwriter Leslie Bohem proposed a storyline centered around pregnancy and possession to producers. However, this concept was rejected due to an executive's pregnancy at the time, leading the producers to opt for David Chaskin's idea instead. Bohem's pregnancy concept eventually found its way into the sequel, A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, which he wrote the screenplay for. Despite being offered the opportunity to direct once again, Wes Craven declined due to script-related issues. Consequently, Jack Sholder, who had no inclination towards creating horror films, was ultimately selected as the director. Principal photography for the film commenced in June 1985. As disclosed by director Jack Sholder during an interview, he revealed that he had limited time to prepare for the movie, which involved a substantial number of special effects, many of which he had no prior experience in overseeing. The film's special effects team was led by Kevin Yeager, responsible for Freddy's design, and Mark Shostrom, who created the transformation effects where Freddy emerges from Jesse's body. The score for the movie was composed by Christopher Young, and I think he did a fantastic job. As a matter of fact, I prefer the score for Freddy's Revenge over the original score any day of the week. Not to take anything away from the music for the first film, it's just that Freddy's Revenge's score simply works better. There's been this slowly growing movement over the last few years of people from all walks of life coming together to celebrate how good of a movie Freddy's Revenge actually is. Because believe it or not, it seemed like for a long time at least, the vast majority of Elm Street fans did not really like Freddy's Revenge, if at all. And to be honest, I've never really understood why. And whether or not the slow-building cult following is sincere or simply a trend is beyond me. But for the sake of the film's legacy, I think it does deserve every bit of the cult following it can amass, as I've always been very fond of this film ever since childhood. Is it sort of an outlier when put up against the first film or the rest of the franchise after Part 2? Absolutely. But that doesn't automatically make it a weak film. Is it weird? Yes. Is it quirky? Yes. But do you know what else this film has to offer? An interesting plot, although confusing sometimes considering the rules and reality of Freddy Krueger himself, some funny lines of dialogue, a lot of quirky and memorable characters, a fantastic location for the film's finale, one of the most unintentionally funny and awkward main characters ever, and a version of Freddy Krueger that is absolutely the franchise's scariest version. As in the first film, Robert Englund returns as Freddy Krueger, and his portrayal of Freddy Krueger in this movie is more menacing and terrifying than in the original film, due in part to the makeup and special effects used to create his appearance, which makes him look like an angry and gnarled hook-nosed witch with yellow eyes than the simple grotesque burn victim he was in the first film. This version of Freddy Krueger is absolutely the most frightening depiction of the character out of the entire series, and although New Nightmare Freddy is still my favorite version overall, and what I believe to be the coolest look for the character, Freddy's Revenge Freddy is inarguably the most frightening. Interestingly enough, New Line Cinema initially considered using an anonymous extra in a rubber mask to portray Freddy Krueger, similar to how other masked killers like Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers had been played in previous films. However, the studio changed their minds after realizing that the extra's physical movements were not suitable for the role and did not match the character's intended portrayal. The extra did appear briefly as Freddy in one scene during Coach Snyder's death scene, but was not seen clearly due to the steam in the shower. The studio quickly realized their error and brought back Robert Englund for the remainder of the film and the franchise thereafter. In addition to Robert Englund, the rest of the cast did a great job as well, and although the performances are all drenched in the thick 80s-ness of that 1985 era, they're truly standouts all their own, and are anything but forgettable. Mark Patton as Jesse, as funny and awkward a character as he is, whether intentional or incidental, is absolutely on point in his acting, and while he spends a lot of the runtime freaking out and trying like an insane person to convince everyone of Freddy's impending return, there's never a point where you don't believe in his plight, and he is absolutely the main character this film needed. Kim Myers does a great job as Lisa, the film's equivalent to the girl next door trope. Robert Russler is funny as hell as Ron Grady, and Marshall Bell as Coach Snyder is somebody straight out of a Porky's or Meatballs movie. I mean, he is hilarious. Again, whether intentional or accidental. Plus, Bob Shea himself, cameoing as the bartender at the gay bar, is a blink-and-you-miss-it moment, but a laugh-out-loud appearance by the legend himself nonetheless. But when it comes to the cast of Freddy's Revenge, we can't forget to talk about the badass of badasses himself, Clu Gallagher, who appears in the film as Jesse's dad, and as always, commands every scene he's in, whether it's something funny, a few simple lines of dialogue, or a scene where he's battling an exploding bird. Let's not forget about the rest of the striking effects we haven't talked about yet, such as the dogs with deformed human faces, all the stuff at the pool party sequence, the awesomely cheesy bus sequence at the beginning, the Freddy belly burster scene, and so on and so forth. This movie is just packed to the brim with great special effects, and as cheesy as they sometimes are, you just relish in their execution. And if there's one thing the Nightmare franchise is known for, it's its imaginative effects in each and every entry. A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, is a worthy addition to the franchise and a standout horror film in its own right. Its unique take on Freddy Krueger, combined with impressive special effects and a talented cast, make it a must-see for horror and Nightmare fans alike. With that said, A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge, is a masterpiece.